Why do people have affairs in the workplace? And why have I done a video about it? Well, this video is not to judge anyone, it's to let you know what's going on in our minds and emotionally for us. Affairs are the easiest thing to get into and the hardest thing to get out of. And so I'm going to go through the different reasons why people have affairs, and particularly why they have them with the nanny, with the secretary, in therapeutic relationships. Then you've got the teacher and the student situation that we hear of in the news more and more, and all these inappropriate relationships that cause a lot of problems. So the first reason I want to give you is pure boredom. So we might have a job that's a bit boring, we've had the job for a while, we know how to do it like the back of our hand, and a new employee joins the environment where we are. Or it might be that somebody we've known for a while just takes on a new look for us, or there might be a bit of flirting around the coffee machine in the photocopier. And so boredom is the first reason. It's very simple, and our lives sometimes can feel a little bit humdrum, and they just give a bit of a kick to a bit more excitement to going into the office on a Monday morning, especially if you're somebody that has something like Sunday night blues. So really you leave off work on the Friday, you only really have Saturday off, and Sunday you're thinking about how you have to go back to work the following day. So having that little bit of interest in the background is why some people go into affairs. Straightforward boredom. The next reason we might have an affair is that we are getting on with our life, getting on with our relationship and our job, and somebody flatters us. Now, flattery disables our ego, and so it kind of comes under the ego radar, and we might not notice it at first. Somebody just says a little nice comment or a flirty comment, and we are flattered. Something we know that it's occurred, but we don't pay attention to it. What happens is, over the next sort of 2 or 3 days, is that flattery seems to take more hold, and so then the next time we see that person we think, oh, they made us feel quite nice about ourselves. We didn't think that that was going to happen, but it did, and they've turned up again. Maybe I'll have a little flirt and get that nice feeling of flattery again. So that's the second reason. The third reason I've listed here is validation. And what happens when we go into long-term relationships is that the person we're in the relationship with at the beginning of the relationship can make us feel good about ourselves. They can validate us, and it's very much looking at each other, paying attention. And as the relationship goes on, what happens is naturally people stop looking at each other, stop paying attention. You see each other all the time, so the other two things apply here. Maybe you get a bit bored in your home relationship. And so somebody who is giving you attention, who is validating you, might compliment you on your efforts and your achievements and tell you you've done a really good job and well done. And something might be happening in the back of your mind where you're thinking, well, this is nice, this person at work is giving me validation, but I'm not getting that at home. And so there's this sort of gap, this distance opens up where you're starting to compare the relationship you have at home with the relationship you're now having in the workplace, and somebody might think you're more attractive. It's hard to always think the other person's fantastically attractive when you discuss things like bills and everything else that happens in reality. And that brings me nicely on to this concept of fantasy. Fantasy is spelt right here. It's PH in psychoanalysis, which is something one of my disciplines I teach in. And so everybody that is slightly foreign to us, whether we see them in the gym, maybe we see them in the staff room, maybe we go somewhere once a week, or just going from home where we are our more real selves, we go into the social world where we put on these social faces, and we can be whoever we want to be, especially now you have online, you have all sorts of profiles that people are making, and we can be whoever we want to be, because in fantasy everything works in fantasy. And so we don't really like dealing with reality much, because reality can get tough. You'll hear me say that a few times in these different videos that I'm producing for you. But fantasy of the other person, especially you might go home and you're with your partner on the sofa, but that's kind of maybe a bit too real, too boring. You're discussing money, maybe the lack of it, where to go on holiday. There'll be maybe somebody's got a family issue going on, and you can't really be bothered to talk about it, or you've got an issue going on and the other person doesn't want to support you with that. But then what we do is we fill in the gaps, because our minds do not like gaps. So whenever we come across a gap, our mind will fill it in with a fantasy which is much more palatable than the reality. And don't forget, the people we live with really know us, because towels on the bathroom floor, the fridge psychology, I could go into that. And then we go into fantasy, and that other person is now looking much more attractive. Then the other thing that can happen is this concept of authority. So we might be in a position of authority over that person we've started to become attracted to. So here we could talk about the boss and the secretary, or we could talk about the employer and the nanny, or a doctor and a patient, or a teacher and a student, all inappropriate and imbalances of power and authority. And if we're the person with the authority, we might, it's a bit of an ego stroke, that this concept of, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, which can in fact fuel our excitation. So sometimes we like doing things that we know we shouldn't. And so we can be in the position of authority, where we are upholding our position and holding it together, and then eventually we drop that defense and indulge in the relationship. Or we might be the other way around. We might be the person with less power in that relationship, and we kind of like the authority figure, somebody who puts us in check, who seems to be able to command power. It might be that we watch them in a managerial position, giving other people orders and instructions, and we kind of like that, because secretly we know we're having access to that person when everybody else is having to follow their orders. And then the concept of transference. Now this is a word from psychoanalysis. Transference is where, for example, our first relationship with our mums and our dads might have been a great relationship, or it might not have been a great relationship. But what we try and do as adults is replicate the original relationship, and then transfer our feelings and our thoughts and our behaviours about that original relationship into the one we're now going into. And so it might be that we are looking for compensation for the experience we didn't have as children. We are now looking to this other person to compensate it, to make it better for us. And then the last thing, and it's an important thing here, is this concept of familiarity. And the word familiarity, if we take the end off the word and put the Y on it, that comes from the root stem of the word family. And essentially we form bonds and attachments to people that we see every day. There is a sentence in the Bible, not to be religious on you, but it does say we covet that which we see every day. And so just by virtue of the fact you're seeing the same person every single day makes you start to feel like a kinship towards them. So it's familiar to you, they feel like your family. And so it might be that you have to travel around the country with your work colleagues, and then you form this kind of bonded unit and move around in this unit. And so it can simply be that you're morally upstanding, you're not really vulnerable to an affair, but just by virtue of the fact that you see the same person every single day means that you have unconsciously formed a very deep relationship with that person. So it might simply be that. So now, why am I doing this little video for you? And by the way, if you want to hear more things about psychology, more things about our behaviour, loads more videos coming out for you, so don't forget to subscribe to YouTube, or you can go onto my website and subscribe on there, and then you'll get my articles free and any kind of media coming up. So the reason why I've done this video is because that number 6 on your list there, transference. So imagine you are, let's have the example of, you are a therapist and you're going to work in a prison, and you meet somebody who seems to have had quite a difficult life, a hard life, and you think to yourself, initially you're just there to do your job, but they are projecting into you, they're transferring their experiences onto you. And what can accidentally happen over time is this concept of counter-transference. And so I'm using the example as the prison, but really this can be in any workplace situation. Counter-transference is where you start to relate back, and then what will happen is you'll call that love. And so the reason I'm making this video is I've seen lots of people, good people, go into managerial, therapeutic, authoritative positions, and they are just wiped sideways because they think they have fallen in love with somebody they're working with. It's not love, it's counter-transference, and it's familiarity. Not to be moral on you, I'm definitely not doing that. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not judging, but I'm just saying, consider firstly these examples that I've given you today, why we go into these relationships inappropriately, but also just consider this, of the losses that you've got to lose. The first thing that you might lose is your career that you've worked really hard for, and your job. The second thing you might lose, obviously, is your partner that you're in the relationship with, and it might be that you're married, that you have children, and then you're going to lose those relationships with those children. And then the next thing you're going to lose is clarity, because unless you're listening to somebody like me pointing out what's happened for you and how to kind of get back out of it, then you'll lose clarity. If you're very up close to somebody, and if you've started a sexual relationship, then you're already into exchange, and you'll lack clarity, and distance restores clarity. So you need to come away from that situation and, you know, have a really serious rethink, and maybe reach out to a really close friend in confidentiality, just to say, can you see what's going on? Whenever I hear the word it's complicated, I think, oh, it's not complicated, actually. It's very simple. If you're in a complicated relationship, that's not a good relationship in my experience of people, dealing with people. When I hear the word complicated, I think, and that's your ego, seeing, you know, compassion where it's not due, having empathy for the other person where it's not warranted, and actually when you look at it, you might not be getting too much back either. And the very last thing you're going to lose is respect, and not just respect of your colleagues and your friends and your family, but ultimately, when it's all calmed down again, respect for yourself. And we don't really want to lose respect for ourselves, because it's hard to respect ourselves in the first place. So if you can, if I give you these reasons why you go in, that's my motivation, is to just let you know what's going on, so hopefully you can not go into these relationships in the first place. You know, if you're in the wrong relationship, use courage, have a chat with your partner, tell them that you're not happy, you need to move on or come to some other arrangement. But when you bring a third person into the relationship, somebody is definitely going to get hurt, and I'd rather it wasn't you. Okay, take care of yourselves, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.